Okay, good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to the fourth day of the Tech Talk series, kindly sponsored by MediaLink. This next session is kindly hosted by Pragmatic, solving the privacy of change in an always connected world. Please welcome moderator, founder, and CEO of Mobile Media Summit, Paran Johar. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. We got the mic on. You told me to scream. I will scream. So thank you guys all for coming. I know it's early on Wednesday, and I'm sure like at least half of you, like me, are probably a little hungover. So thank you guys all for coming. Privacy is probably not the sexiest thing right now. However, I'm here to tell you you're wrong, actually. Because, you know, in advertising, you've come to Cannes, there's a revolution happening in advertising right now. And what you've seen is kind of this merging of art and science. And during the Lions, you've really kind of, everyone focuses on the art, right? The art aspect of that. But what you don't see is the science. And behind that science is kind of this big, important topic called big data. And that's kind of it's just out there and looming. And consumers are getting nervous. As a matter of fact, 84%, you can't really see that, so I'll read it for you. 84% of consumers claim to be concerned about their online and digital privacy. That's huge, 84%. Now, if you think that marketers aren't taking notice, well, in fact, 60% of marketers worldwide who plan to take additional steps to protect consumers' data and privacy in 2013. Now, this is an incredibly complicated issue because especially now with fragmentation between different screens, mobile, tablet, connected TV, different identifiers, how do I make it all simple? Well, I've got some great news for you today. The industry has come together. We've got a great group of companies here who have come together not for themselves, but for the industry to solve that problem. So with that, I'd like the panelists to introduce themselves and say a few words about their company.
How you doing? I'm Bob Walzak, the VP of Mobile and Emerging Media at Pragmatic.
Hi, I'm Greg Williams. I'm a co-founder and senior vice president of our open business development partnership programs.
And you're from MediaMath. I'm James Lamberti. I am the GM of a company called AdTruth, which provides device recognition technology that we'll talk about a little bit.
I'm Kevin Trilly. I'm VP of Product of Trustee, which is a privacy management company.
Wow, that was the briefest introduction. You guys all must be hungry. Usually it's a full freaking commercial. And I worked here, and I dated, I don't know, this actress. Okay, so let's get into that. Exactly. Now you've told us who you are and like 2 words on your company. Tell us a little bit more about what your companies do and how they work within this ecosystem.
Sure. So Pragmatic is a supply-side platform focusing on yield for publishers. We work in the premium sector of the publisher or supply market. So focusing on the largest and biggest brands and helping them to monetize their content. With a full end-to-end solution focused in programmatic. One of the early companies in the space for this, leading the programmatic market. Prior to that, I was the founder and CEO of a company called Ringleader Digital. So I've been in the mobile and emerging space for close to a decade at this point. Solving this challenge in privacy is something that it's been a big issue for the market, I think, because of the fragmentation within the devices and the various identifiers. IDFA and Android ID and various cooking technologies, other identifying technologies like AdTruth. So it's something that I think is really important for the marketplace and it's important to solve as an industry to be able to have privacy-safe, unique identification.
So what MediaMath is a buy-side marketing platform. We focus on Fortune 500 companies and helping them to deliver business results, whether that means moving products off the shelves, selling services in an appropriate way, and providing the right message to the consumer at the right time. All of this through what you'll probably hear a lot talked about today, a cross-channel means, whether that's display, video, mobile, or even email and social. Doing that in a way that one hits the consumer at across those touch points in the right way with the right message, and two, in a privacy-safe environment.
Yeah, and just a little bit more about AdTruth, so you have a little context for what we do. We are device recognition technology. We're essentially cookieless recognition. So as Bob described, we have IFA, Android ID, cookies, a lot of fragmentation going on, and of course, key to the future and the experience for consumers is great creative linked with identification. Without that linkage, I think the industry really struggles, right, to deliver on the audience, to deliver on a plan that makes sense. So AdTruth was founded about a year ago and has deployed a technology that is allowing identification to occur even without the use of any sort of hard identifier like a cookie or IFA or Android ID. And it works every time on every device anywhere in the world. So it solves a lot of problems and can be used in combination with other IDs. The biggest thing we faced in the first year is privacy. And there's a lot of legitimate concerns that came up in the context of this type of technology. As powerful and important as it was for delivering great creative to the audience you want, without a privacy aspect and solution, very hard for the market to take advantage of this type of innovative technology for the benefit of the buyers, for the benefit of the sellers, and that's where I think Kevin can talk about Trustee.
Sure. Is this one on? Yep. Okay. So Trustee, when I mentioned data privacy, there's really two parts to what data privacy means for companies. First part's a traditional compliance business that helps the global landscape of different governmental requirements or industry requirements for companies, and there's two types of companies we deal with. Usually a publisher website or a publisher application, and what we do is we help companies figure out and navigate the landscape of requirements they need to do to be in compliance. And we also build a lot of technology tools that let them understand what's happening on their properties, whether it be a website or an app. The other part of the company is about what I would call consumer trust. And a lot of what you do with privacy is obviously a reflection of the company to the end users. And so there's a big component of building trust as you are using great advertising technologies or just trying to engage your audience on your website directly. And so we help convey that compliance in a way that's very brand safe and also allows consumers to trust the company. So there's really two parts to it. The part we'll be talking about today is really the specific products we offer that helps advertisers communicate choices to consumers. And choices meaning the identification technologies and all the relevant advertising technologies that are being used involve some form of identification of the user. And the trust component of this comes by, outside of the compliance side, of letting consumers be aware of what's going on and making sure that they know they have a choice to participate or not participate. And we'll go through the specifics of what that is as we roll through this panel.
So you guys all came together, right, to develop this. What are you guys seeing? And I don't want to do this linear, so please just jump in, and I want us to be a really engaging conversation. Like, what are you guys seeing as emerging solutions in the industry today?
Well, so I think that the concept behind this, and I think really to discuss why we came together, is with the fragmentation across identification, across identifiers. You're looking at things like Firefox 22, disabling third-party cookies. I think from that perspective, there's a challenge here. From a media standpoint, you want to deliver the right message to the right person to deliver the greatest impact for your brands. To do that, identification is critical. So to do that also in a way that honors consumers' choice and privacy is very important across the board. I mean, I think a lot of people in this room may understand the technical aspects of the concept of identification and privacy. However, the general consumer may not, or most likely does not. And so we want to be able to operate in a market in a way that honors consumer choice, allows them to opt in or opt out, and really, that was the basis for this. And so I think ultimately, if we can deliver on a way to do privacy-safe identification across all identifiers globally, across all devices, that really allows for us to be able to operate freely and safely and do what we really do well from a media industry perspective. So I think the concept was to pull together companies within the ecosystem to actually deliver a live solution, technology solution for the market to be able to implement, have an open architecture that is downloadable and reviewable and modular. So you can have any privacy system paired up with any identification system and use that to protect your business while running your business the way it was designed.
Yeah, from the buy side, we fundamentally take the approach of what is absolutely critical from a privacy standpoint is one, notice, and two, customer choice. And what I mean by that is the opportunity to opt out, right? Different countries have different rules and regulations. But what we have seen and done in the market thus far is one, start looking at a way to create what does a cookieless world look like, right? And what happens in that world. We've also started taking the approach of from an advertiser perspective, how do we get the data to be their own data? Our recent acquisition of Akamai's data management capabilities moves cookies from a third-party world into a first-party world where the advertiser data becomes their own, right? That's one aspect. Now, that works in desktop approaches. That doesn't work in all the mobile approaches. And so what that means is we have to build a hybrid approach for the buy side so that they can leverage, one, their own advertiser data in a first-party cookie world, but then two, employing solutions like AdTruth that enable this ID approach across device.
No, I think, so look, I think the key thing is we as a group, with the companies involved up here, have gone from theory to practice, right? I think we've been talking for years about how do we actually proactively get to the point where consumers trust this industry. I mean, that's fundamentally, I think, what we're talking about. I mean, I have a 3-year-old and a 6-year-old. I'm worried that 20 years from now when I retire, they'll say, Dad, you were in advertising? You were in digital advertising? I think literally the future of our relationship with the consumer is at stake. We can't continue to run as an industry without really educating these consumers and really truly giving them a choice they understand. And so I think what we've done as a collective group is two things. One, we put in front of the industry an actual solution. I can buy with identification. I can sell with identification. I can use any type of identification to do that, including the type of technology we run, but other technologies as well. And it's simple and it works, and there's actually a framework today that any company anywhere in the world can now use. I mean, that's really the key invention here. And what we go now is instead of talking about this and worrying about it with consumers, we start educating them. And we start saying, look, you can trust this industry. You're going to have a better experience through creative, right? You're going to have a better experience without seeing the same ad 500 times in a week because we can frequency cap again, right? So I think it really is about going from theory into practice of a real product and then really moving now to education. So I think the thing I'll say to this group is this is a pretty complex thing. It's a pretty technical thing, but we need the industry involved. And as you learn about what we've done and what this technology can do collectively, I think the more you're involved as a business and a company in helping us educate, the better and stronger the entire industry will be. So those are kind of my comments and thoughts.
I think the thing I'll add to that is if you take a very high level at what privacy is in 2013 and people that have heard about in the US, the NSA and those kind of things, there's a lot of perspectives being shared that only talk about one part of the solution or the problem and then the solution for consumers. And James's point about education is really important. There's different ways to solve the problem. You've got a governmental approach here in the EU, you've got a self-regulatory approach in the US, and you've got browsers and platforms that are trying to offer tools directly for consumers. And the key is, do the consumers ultimately who are using the system know what is going on? And it's a value exchange. It's not just about shutting things down and protecting yourself, it's about allowing your personal currency to be exchanged for value on the web, which is usually not paid for. And so as we go and talk about the technology, as we see these great ads, the key is let the consumers get involved directly with an education perspective so they understand, and they may still want to shut it all down, but they may understand that there is an exchange that they feel comfortable with, and then they can control those choices that are happening, and that's really what we want to present.
A value exchange between relevant content and control, right, is what I'm hearing over and over. So I think some people, you guys have touched on it, but the audience may not know, how does this really different than the desktop environment? I mean, there's certain technical things, but broadly, how is it different?
Sure. I mean, well, that's the aspect, right? So when there's a dam, water tries to find a way to flow around it, right? So in this market, there's no cookies. There's no, cookies, third-party cookies don't work consistently across devices. Safari is on devices is disabled when it's shipped. So from that perspective, I think there's been challenges. So companies have kind of tried to come up with ways to enable that solution. However, the challenge and the concern is that in enabling a new identification solution, now you have a whole new challenge on protection. So the DAA came out with their ad choices program. The DAA is the Digital Advertising Alliance, and their concept was to create an umbrella around the cookie to enable privacy-safe usage and gave choices to the consumer. However, now it had to be expanded to cover all identifiers, and I think that that's the point here, is that as long as you have a privacy system paired with an identification system, that allows for choice. It allows for things to be done in a consumer safe and friendly way, and that delivers on what we're here to do, which is deliver a brand message that's relevant and powerful, but not invade on the consumer's privacy.
So Bob, it sounds like mobile really was the impetus to develop a cross-screen system for this.
Sure. Well,
right? It's the driver, because everything you just mentioned.
Well, absolutely. I think mobile is the starting point, but then I think that it expands beyond that. And I think now that you have Firefox and Safari, IE, the various browsers in the marketplace are taking a stance as well, and so it's adding to the fragmentation. So conceptually, it's still going to be a need, and then you have other companies that are differentiating on their identifiers.
Yeah.
So they're creating identification technology to resolve the issue as well. At the end of the day, the end consumer really doesn't know, doesn't care. They're not connected to the ad networks and the companies selling and serving those advertising. So it's the logic here is that you really need to be able to get ahead of that for the consumer, so that it doesn't grind everything to a halt without it.
Right. Anyone else want to comment?
No, I mean, I think we can see it in the numbers, right? To your point about mobile, in the last several years, right, the consumer is just consuming an incredible amount of media on mobile, but the economics of this industry are not working on mobile, right? We're not getting the return that we all want for the publisher. It's really difficult to execute for the advertiser. We haven't had identification. We haven't had reporting. All these things have been a huge struggle. And I think this year we've seen, through a lot of inventions of a lot of companies, especially the 4 or 5 up here, the resolution to that problem. We now can identify in mobile at scale on any device, anytime. It might be a variety of ways to do it, and I think to Bob's point, it doesn't matter which identification method you use. Now that we've solved the core issue in mobile, which is identification, how do we then link that to a privacy opt-out solution so that folks like MediaMind can buy at scale in a targeted way on behalf of their advertisers, on behalf of the media planners and buyers. So, to me, mobile was the problem. It was an articulation of the issue we face as an industry, and having solved the identification aspects and the privacy aspect simultaneously, I think is going to take us in a much better direction from an economic perspective for the advertisers, the publishers, for everybody. And I don't know. I love what we were talking about earlier with your example of the work with the carriers and how. Yeah, you mind sharing that? Yeah.
Sure. From overall, from a MediaMath perspective, the most critical thing is that we provide a solution that is relevant for today, but is also advancing for the future. And what that means is we employ a cookie-based world today. We allow that approach to continue and to prosper, but under the regulations and guidelines that we as an industry all set, right? And again, I go back every time to notice and consent for an opt-out, right? In our world, what that means is we almost apply a cascading approach. And in the perfect client case, we apply all three, which is a pixel-based approach where cookies become first-party cookies, not third-party cookies, using our pixel-free solution. We then cascade down to where we receive an ID, whether it be from a carrier directly on first-party data, or whether that is a solution like AdTruth, right? After that, we then take a normal pixel third-party based approach using cookies, right? All of that is wrapped with an opt-out choice that is synced across all three of those solutions.
So I talked a little bit about in my opening remarks this merging of art and science, right? And especially at Cannes, it's been a big theme. I call it the merging also of content and context. Content being the actual creative product, context is where it's seen. How are you guys seeing targeting technology being part of the creative process?
Well, I mean, I think this is actually really kind of the center point here, which is if you have the market right now is starting to merge into a cross-device market, meaning knowing you and your 3 to 5 connected devices. I think in foundation, this around mobile, that was an initial battleground for it, but now you want to be able to do more advanced things. So either dynamic creative, being able to tailor it to the specific user, their interests and intent. In addition to that, maybe being able to tell messages across screens. So being able to know the person's on their phone in the afternoon, maybe on the watching TV on their tablet, smart TV, at work with their computer. If you're being able to, that allows to the advancements from a creative standpoint, right? So being able to tell messages across screens, link that to a single audience profile across all devices. And I think where the scrutiny was pretty intense around mobile, I think it's going to be even that much more intense when you start thinking about telling that message across screens for a single user. And that's I think that's opportunity and challenge here.
So that's almost being able to then serve a more relevant ad based on their life cycle within a purchase funnel, if you will, right? So for example, I'm in market for a car, right? I might see a branding ad on my television, then I'm researching that car on my tablet. Right. I might see a more product comparison, let's say in the SUV category versus other ones. And then I'm driving around, I'm near a car dealership, and then I get an offer to test drive. If I come in now, I get a free download of something, right? Or a free $500 off if I come in and I test drive the car now.
Well, there's apps being built for cars and users. There's ways to monitor your home through your app for applications. There's a way to connect you between your tablet, which a lot of people look at the 2-foot experience and then the 12-foot experience with your TV screen. So there's a lot of opportunity to connect the connected devices for a user and drive a more relevant experience at the time of interest and intent.
Yeah, we are increasingly seeing the use of dynamic creative across the board, right? The goal of dynamic creative is to provide the relevant message, whether it be price, whether it be call to action, whatever that is in that creative, right? And increasingly, our clients are wanting to do that cross-channel. So that means that they want to be able to know that an ad with a $21.99 price tag on it was delivered in a display world, but then also in a mobile world, they want the exact same price to show up so that they have some kind of touch point across those marketing channels, right? What that means and what becomes important is to be able to continue leveraging data so that you can gain that insight, but doing it in a safe and effective way from a privacy standpoint. And so what becomes important for all of us is to prepare for that world when cookies aren't around, right? And that becomes a very strategic priority for us.
One thing I'd like to add is that as you hear about interests being collected across devices and over these different platforms, the corollary on the privacy side is called a preference, which is the user saying, I want to participate or not participate. And just as you hear this being built across these different platforms, the preference of the user needs to follow that. And that's part of what's very important as we think about building profiles, identifying and building profiles across device. You also need to think through the consumer's expectation is not going to understand the savviness of this group here, all these different platforms and devices. Those users that don't want to play, they just want to make it work. And so the challenge is following this very complex evolving system with a privacy preference system that just helps those users understand it simply.
I'm just curious, in terms of the audience, this is a big kind of point that I really harp on, and I use 2 examples, right? So I moved from New York to Los Angeles. I'm just going to go on a little tangent here. Let me just cough. And
Bear with
I'm
me.
in market for an SUV, right? And I'm on my smartphone, and I'm looking, I just got a kid. I'm like, I need a luxury SUV. I'm like, please send me a relevant banner that says, Mercedes, that my behavioral surfing patterns, I'm in LA. Please send me a lease offer for a freaking, which models I'm researching. Please send me a lease offer for a luxury SUV in Southern California, or an offer to test drive one, or a deal. Because then that advertising, it's no longer an ad anymore. It bridges the line between ad and content, relevant content. And that's the value exchange that we all talk about. And the same thing, you're coming to Cannes, right? You're flying, got to book your travel. Oh, geez, I got to find a hotel. What a pain in the ass that is, because everyone's over here. Wouldn't you love an ad for a hotel that's got rooms available, right, for a decent price? And they know all that. That crosses that line between just an ad and content. And there's a value exchange that I think it provides benefit to the consumer. So we've talked about the good and so what challenges, what are the challenges for the current state of privacy and digital advertising for the consumer? What are the big challenges?
Well, I think that it's having it, there's guidelines out there, right? So we built this in the DAA framework, and from that direction, we chose that because we really feel as though they're leading that initiative in the marketplace. And so the challenge, however, is that you have to be. They're talking about how you should apply this, how you should deliver this. But if you have multiple types of identifiers, what's the right one to use for privacy opt-out and choice, right? From our view, what we kind of determined here was that it's about a deterministic identifier, meaning it's persistent. For 100% certainty, it's that device. So you can, for 100% certainty, honor that choice and that decision made. It's not a probability of that. Now there's other technology like AdTruth, which is probabilistic, meaning that it's using. Well, I can let James explain that better, but it's using multiple discriminators to be able to determine uniqueness, and then applying that to the user. So now, or that user device. So now the pairing of that, being able to say, okay, regardless of the identifying technology, this is how we put those pieces together. And I think the challenge that we solved up here is that we actually did it in a real live environment by pairing these platforms and companies together and delivering on that.
And not verticalized, right?
Not verticalized. It's global and it's across all devices.
Yeah, I guess the key for me is simple, right? And it's not just pairing your question about the consumer. Like, I think the consumer needs simplicity.
They do.
Right? Same with the media planners and the creatives. We've got to get to where this is simple. It's really, frankly, was our responsibility as the technologists behind a lot of this to make this happen. We can communicate simply to the consumer. You have a choice, right? By the way, the best choice, the smartest choice, is to let us contextualize your world, because you're going to have a better experience. We're going to know you're in Southern California. What you described as your example is trivial, right?
Yeah.
We can know you're in Southern California and that you like Mercedes-Benz or BMWs.
You've got behavioral data on my
yeah,
surfing patterns. You've got carrier data, right?
Yeah,
You've got geo data.
Yeah.
Please, make
Yeah.
my life easier.
Exactly. So
I'm coming to Cannes. Please.
Exactly. So, I think that's what we're talking about now is the creatives and the planners can get back to a point where I can target and plan for my audience by location, build a campaign that is multi-screen easily. I know the consumer is going to have a choice and a visualization understanding going forward of how they can participate or not. And I think, underneath it, there's multiple identification schemes. AdTruth technology is very different than cookies and IFA and Android IDs. Like, we're probabilistic. We're math, right? So the way we work is to say, this device that Greg's holding here it's 90% likely the device he's holding that we saw today on this website was the same device we saw yesterday. That's very, very different technically when trying to pair for privacy than other things like cookies. But you know what? All of that is sort of like, consumer doesn't care. Consumer's never going to understand it or never going to care. And frankly, the media planners and the creatives, we don't want you to care, right? We just want you to know that you can plan a campaign, deliver a multi-screen creative, run it safely, securely across, any one of Bob's publishers or through Greg's technology as a DSP, and you've got the ability to just, frankly, get back to being building great creative and leveraging the data in a way that makes sense for the consumer. To me, it's all about simplicity and clarifying this problem for the future of what we're talking about here, and having a real example of it.
One of the things I would say is we work with some of the largest publishers in the market, eBay, Hearst, PayPal. PayPal is actually a part of this with us. And they really, at the expense of their business, they're not going to let privacy trip them up. That is something that's critical to them. They have a broader business beyond advertising, every one of them, and that's another vertical to them. However, the consumer experience is core. Every one of them you talk to will say that that's the number one thing that they need, that they want to make sure they protect, because if they don't feel safe on their content or their site, using their other products, then that's where it all stops. So, by working with 300 of the top publishers in the marketplace as a company, it's for us to ensure that our platform and solution delivers on the privacy and choice that their consumers need, so to ensure that we protect their business.
So we heard about the consumer challenges, and I know you guys have touched on them, but I think it's really important to kind of summarize exactly the solutions. We obviously know multi-screen, right? Multi-screen is one of them. What are some of the other kind of components to this solution?
I mean, beyond, so that from the component standpoint,
Well, you said the challenge is obviously multiple devices, different identifiers, so solutions in terms of what you guys have built, right?
Yeah, I think that this solution is the architecture, right? So this is the actual delivery on pairing a privacy system and a identification system. So
but it's also open, right, to the industry.
It's open.
There's
a really complex slide with lines and dots as to actually how all the pieces
really
fit
fast.
together.
We'll get to that near the end. We'll get to it to the end, I
You'll
promise.
see it. But,
We'll lose the audience if we get to it now, I promise.
But it's for the market. It's for everyone to be able to leverage and use. We didn't do it for our own personal gain. Yeah, we did it because it was the right thing for our businesses, but it's also the right thing for the marketplace to adopt and deliver on.
And how did you guys come up, and the second part of that, by the way, address please the second part as well, which is, how did you come up with who came up with or how did it, you guys knew the industry needed it, right? But how did it,
Yeah, let me just explain first part of the question, the second
go ahead,
part.
please.
So, I think what you're hearing is really a lot of the technology layer, which is sort of, sub-layer of the consumer. But I think a very important part we're talking about is there's some visualization of the consumer that all this is happening. And it's an icon, it's a little blue triangle, we'll show it to you later. But I think that's a very important part, and it's also a challenge in itself in that there's an awareness to the consumer to know that that is out there. There it is.
Here's a triangle.
Here's our time. So, like to show of hands. Who's seen this before? Okay, very few of you. Okay, so of the few of you that have seen it, how do you know that it's clickable? Has anyone ever clicked on it? Okay, so this is really the representation of the system that we're talking about that is just rolling out over the last couple years, has seen trillions of impressions. But as you see here, it's not globalized yet, and people are not aware of it yet to know what to even do. What happens is if you click on this, you get an experience that says, hi consumer, this value exchange is happening, and you have a choice to opt out, essentially. And so that's really what the major component that's new also is, as all the piping has been built in through these different systems that get very, very complex as you start talking about real-time programmatic ad delivery, you also need a way to communicate this to the consumer in the simple, educated manner. So I think that's the one part that's, want to make sure you conveyed to you.
That's a lot simpler than the chart that,
Yeah, the chart probably not that relevant.
The chart's
Yeah, but I think the second part of your question was really how did we come about this? And Bob mentioned this concept of a DAA, which is an super industry group that spans all the major marketing groups in the US and globally. And what those groups have done is come together and represented by these great companies to say, we want to take control of this and provide a solution for the consumers. And so the evolution of it has been the industry acting proactively and working alongside their respective governments to provide this solution so consumers have choice. The industry doesn't want to rely on different browsers doing different things or platforms doing something and other platforms not doing something. They wanted a uniform way to communicate to consumers and put a lot of wood behind the arrow to educate and roll this out at massive scale. And it's been trillions of impressions. So the evolution has been, stage one of that has been just for desktop, which is again a standard cookie-based system. The evolution is now leading into mobile, which brings out mobile apps in addition to mobile browsers, and those mobile browsers don't use cookies, as has been talked about. And then the third extension of that is really, James's technology about probabilistic versus cookie-based or deterministic. And so these are the three chapters of evolution. And the direct answer to your question is you had companies that wanted to lean forward and figure out the technology. This is very complex stuff. Put solutions together that work today so that we can show the world it works today, and there's privacy by design is the buzzword. And that's really what we're trying to show today and how it's come to this point.
So, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to real quick comment. I think we talked about the DAA, but I think it's important for this group to understand it's been the EDAA, it's been the W3C, it's been the JIA in Japan, it's been the FTC. The extent to which this group, and we're representing a group of probably now 10 or 20 companies, and it's growing every day. The extent to which we've gone out and tried to proactively involve governments and or consumer representative groups around the world on what we're doing, I think is a big precedent. It's a big change in that the industry now needs to step forward and really take ownership of this problem that I think you saw the data on earlier, and get to the point where technically we fixed it, and now let's start educating. Make consumers aware of the fact that you have a choice, express it through this icon. That choice can be different in the EU, where you're opting in, or in the US, where you're having to opt out. So to me, that is I think that's a big part of what we should all recognize. This isn't just a USDAA thing, it's a global situation. So.
Yeah, I would just add one thing is that, I think you asked how we came up with it. I mean, the fact is that as a company, I joined Podmatic a year ago, and the challenge in mobile and where I started, but working on now video and other platforms, the challenge has been identification, and so I started researching the market to figure out what solutions were available, and in doing so came across a lot of different solutions and vendors and approaches to it, and at the end of the day, everything was on the identification side was a standalone solution. It was just, here's how you do identification. And if you want to figure out privacy, go talk to other companies to figure that out, right? So I think that's where
So you're saying he came up with it, everyone.
I'm just saying that's where the solution came from. It came from the need. It came born out of the need. And as a company, we could have chosen to use that as our competitive edge, or we could have, what we ended up doing in the many whiteboarding sessions was say, look, the right answer is for the market to have this and for everybody to be able to have that protection so that we're not all constantly fighting against each other for the same thing that at the end of the day, the value add is the protection of our whole industry. And I think that that's more important than any one company. So from our view, what we ended up with was pulling the companies together and having that open conversation to deliver on that for the whole marketplace.
I like it. So it's a team effort. I like that. All right. So I think it's important. We talked about notice and choice, and we talked about the trillions of impressions. Can you give me kind of a real life example, real world example? So I'm guessing, I'm going to pretend like I don't know anything, right? So I'm I moved from New York to LA, surfing for my car, and I see an icon on an ad, and I have a choice, right? I'm getting notice and choice. I can get an ad about a Punch the Monkey ad to lower my mortgage, or I can maybe get a relevant SUV ad. Is that a kind of a good dumbed down version?
Yeah, I think the ultimate thing that you're signaling here is your preference to the ad industry. And if you don't want to see a relevant ad that's using your data, your identification, whatever the mechanism is, and it's usually almost always personally identifiable information, then yes, you can opt out and you'll get a Punch the Monkey ad and several times throughout your day. So and the ad industry will know that that's your persistent preference.
Gotcha. Or I can get a relevant message. Right? So now tell us about how the industry, you talked a little bit about the DA, you guys touched on it, and you touched about the worldwide industries. How is the overall reception, let's say, within the ad industry, within the media industry, within the publishing community? How has the reception been so far?
It's been tremendous. I think everyone realizes the challenge and is, dying for the solution, and I think that this is delivering on that. Every company we've talked to has been in and behind us and backing us on this initiative, and I think it was overwhelmingly positive.
What we're seeing is repeatedly our buyers were coming in asking on a daily basis about how do we solve challenges like this, right? And what ended up coming back is you can have the best technologies in the world, but if you don't comply with the DAA and the regulations and get ahead of them so that you almost self-regulate, then you're gonna lose market share, right? It is almost one of those you better bet your business on this because if you don't, it's not going to go well in the long run because other companies are going to surpass you and there's going to be regulations. So it comes down to one, educating all of our client base on what this means, right? And continuing to push new innovation in this area.
Yeah. I just think going back to the very beginning of the conversation and why we're all in con here is like, we got to get to a point where we just get back to being great advertisers and delivering great creative messages without second guessing ourselves at every step around our relationship with the consumer. I mean, ultimately, advertising is a value exchange. It is a understanding between us and those consumers that when we deliver ads to you, we're going to also deliver great content. We're going to deliver great games. I mean, so many businesses have thrived and survived because of the ad model. And it's worked because the advertising itself has been creative, energetic, informative, good entertainment, whatever it is. And the last few years I've seen that slip, especially in mobile. We have to be honest, right? It's been a difficult experience for the consumer because we haven't had identification, we haven't had privacy. So I think bring this full circle, right, Perrin? It's like that's ultimately I think what this means to this audience is get back to building great creative. Right, get back and use mobile with all of the tools and data that we know we can use. Let's start to educate the consumer instead of being worried about the backlash from them. And I think we're just going to be a bigger, better, stronger industry.
So 2 more quick questions, and we're going to go to questions in the audience. How does this relate to other guidelines by trade organizations, or you touched on it a little bit? Because I'm sure,
I think that's actually the most important thing that we're talking about up here, which is that. And we talked about how to reduce the fragmentation, how to manage that from an identification standpoint. However, in talking to all the organizations and industry groups in the market, we realized that the DAA is the largest self-regulatory body in the marketplace, and they've got the right group of companies that work with them to deliver on ad choices and privacy. And so we built this in their framework, and as of today, we're actually handing off this solution to them to be incorporated in their standards and guidelines to be launched within the next couple months. So I think that's it's a big step forward, and it's also, look, we don't want to be a standards organization managing this. We're a group of companies that felt the need to get this in market, and so I think that this was our opportunity, and having the DAA pick this up and incorporate it into its standards and guidelines so there's less fragmentation and having one body to point to in the market, I think was a big win for everybody.
Just one comment about when you hear DA, there is a European DA called the EDA, which is just rolling out as we speak, and so that will be the next extension of what we're talking about as that consortium gets going and starts to deploy. And then, of course, there's Canada and South America and all those different rollouts. But the European perspective is happening right now as we speak.
And when can we expect a more comprehensive set of guidelines to address all the issues we talked about today? Like when's 2.0? Well, I know we're just getting to 1.0, but let's
July is the date we've been given.
Okay.
There's officially going to be.
All right.
Just to start with the DAA, and again, I want to hammer the point that it's the EDA, it's the JIA. I mean, this is meant to be global, truly global, and we built it that way so that it can roll out that way. So July is the date.
July. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, great. Well, we have 10 minutes left, so I want to make sure we have some time for questions from the audience. All right. Question over here. Do we have a mic?
Well, first I want to congratulate you on proactively addressing the issue with a solution that seems like it could become comprehensive. And you talk about context and the context of Cannes and the context of creativity and from the advertiser's point of view, but I think there's also another context that this fits into, which is the recent issue with the NSA, to throw out another 3-letter acronym for you, government agency. And there's a lot of sentiment, especially among millennials, especially in the United States, around issues of privacy now in a much more meta way. And so when I hear what you're doing proactively, I think about how that can be from a consumer point of view, because of course, you're all industry, you speak to the industry as an industry, but we also have this other level behind it, which is ultimately what you are working toward, which is a transparent, authentic approach with consumers. What I'd love to know more about, because I think you touched on it, but from a consumer point of view, because not everybody, believe it or not, wants to have that car ad. There's some people who really, really feel that's spooky, and
Sure.
we know that, and we want to respect that. When I'm, as a user, when I'm on my mobile phone, really, truly, how am I seeing this, and how is this being communicated to consumers so that they get the benefit of this great solution that you've developed?
Yeah, I mean, let me just quickly
Icon.
take the first 30 seconds of that. What I think you're describing is a very important trend. I mean, my background was actually market research, a consumer market researcher for most of my career. But the change that's taking place that you're describing, essentially in the last probably 12 to 18 months, has been privacy's gone from being an industry self-regulatory issue to a major consumer issue, the 84% number. And no one disputes that. I think ultimately what we've got to do, and I think the next phase of this, and a program that at AdTruth we're personally going to work on, is a 1% for education, which is we've got more inventory than we know what to do with in mobile. Like, one of the things we're going to push forward on now that this program's in place is to actually advertise to consumers, you have a choice. Here's how you do this. Here's how in Europe you can opt in and what the benefits are. Here's how in the US you can opt out and why we hope you don't do that. I think it becomes, we have to move to where we actively address the consumer and speak to them as businesses. The advertising industry is doing nothing compared to what the NSA, what was disclosed to the NSA. So I think that's important. That's very important to get outside of just this industry and talk to the consumer. That's the key point for me.
I would say, however, this specific solution is designed to solve for the media industry and advertising, and I don't think we didn't come together for the broader global NSA, other challenges from a privacy standpoint and technology and architecture. I mean, this is for our industry. To be very poignant, I don't want to step beyond that. I think as a group, it's beyond our bounds. But I think that this is privacy globally is clearly critical across devices, regardless of who you are. And so I think this is something we resolved for our industry, which is important. But maybe it's a framework for the rest of the global market.
Look, I would add to that what we owe you as an industry is an easy way to communicate with the consumers on what is happening, right? You open up various publications in the U.S. and the articles that are published are spooky sometimes, right? And what we need to do is change that so that it becomes, listen, this is how this stuff works, and more focus on the education of it, right? I would say we've still got a long way to go on that aspect of it, but I think it's moving very, very quickly at what we can do. So.
Question.
So you said in July there'll be a decision made so you can get on with your business and begin serving ads and making them relevant. And does this mean, for how long will this be, or will the bar keep moving based on consumer advocacy groups? And how does this play out? New set of devices, new set of headaches?
Right,
What
it's a good point. So the DA's evolution has been desktop, as we mentioned, and they're actually very currently about to release their mobile guidelines. And then the third chapter will be this probabilistic or statistical identification. And again, what you're seeing is companies that are even figuring out the technology and deploying real stuff that works before even the guidelines and the principles get finished. And so we're all motivated to do that because that's what, we think it's A, the right thing to do, but B, we want to make the solutions work because there's a lot of rubber hits the road figuring out to do here. So yeah, chapter 4 next year will be something else that we don't know today, TV or whatever it may be. So I think all of us have commercial interest to figure this out and stay ahead of the curve, because we're innovating alongside the industry innovating the identification layer and how to deliver better advertising to more people. And so this is all showing that they're all integrated lockstep. And I can't tell you what that chapter 4 will be, but it'll happen.
I would say that the DAA is going to be the ongoing group that works to manage that, and I think that this is a step towards them showing that their guidelines are comprehensive and across all device identification technology. So DIT is the kind of acronym for this, and it broadens it beyond the cookie and covers it by saying, we're pairing a privacy system with an identification system as the solution we're talking about. But hopefully that's a framework for a more comprehensive answer going forward versus, well, we have new technology, now what do we do with it? This should actually be an answer to that, hopefully.
Yeah, I think to follow on Bob's saying is what we've designed, which is neutral to the industry, is something that's flexible enough, we'll be able to change very quickly. I mean, if you think about what AdTruth does, we're statistically based. If there becomes a piece of data that we're using to provide a statistical or probabilistic view of a consumer, and suddenly that changes, we can change instantaneously and propagate that change to the entire ecosystem in a week. So I think that what's new about this and exciting for me is technically, although this is enormously complex, the flexibility and scalability of it is, I think, really the invention ultimately, and the ability to adapt to whatever changes.
Any other questions? Going once? Going twice? Thank you, guys. Great panel.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you so much. Big round of applause, please. Thank you. The next session on this stage is a masterclass, and it starts at 12 o'clock. Thank you.